On this episode of Beyond the Art, we sit with Edgar Villanueva, author, activist, and founder of the Decolonizing Wealth Project. As a member of the Lumbee tribe, Edgar challenges us to rethink our relationship with money, power, and philanthropy. His work reframes wealth not as accumulation, but as a tool for healing, justice, and restoration. This is Beyond the Art with Edgar Villanueva.
Edgar, welcome to Beyond the Art. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah. Let's just jump into something that's kind of deeply personal. Can you describe what growing up as a member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina meant to you? And how was that upbringing? How did that shape you to be the man that you've become?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I thought about this a lot. When I was 5 years old, my mom moved us from our community to the city. So I'm an urban native. I grew up in Raleigh, which is just about hour and a half, maybe drive from Robeson County, where my tribe is headquartered. I spent a lot of summers going back, but in my school, all the way through high school graduation, I was the only native. And I didn't grow up getting, experiencing a lot of, ceremony or just sort of cultural teachings. And I really sort of resented that. I had a lot of pride in my identity, and I loved going back to Robeson County. And when I got to college, I joined, the Native American Student Organization. And I began the process to actually become an enrolled member of my tribe, because some people in my family were, some people weren't. It was just sort of like, why? Like, there's no benefit. You don't get anything. There wasn't this strong sense of pride that I felt within my family necessarily about being Native American. Everyone was living in poverty and struggling. And so it just wasn't sort of a part of something that was there. But I somehow felt connected to it. And so I went through the process in college to actually, become enrolled. Sort of just immerse myself with fellow Lumbees. And what I learned later in life, because I, beat myself up a lot over not having the same experience necessarily of growing up in the community day to day and feeling less than. I also had a name that is not a Lumbee name. My adoptive father, I have his name. And so that was another way that I felt like other, because I didn't have the typical. But when I look back now that I know a lot about Indigenous culture and worldview, it's really funny because I'm like, actually, I was taught a lot of the things. And the way of life that we had, it was just the way it was. And I didn't know that necessarily that was because we were Indian. I thought this is just how we live and it's normal. And but I'm really able to distinguish now that, there's just certain ways of being that were there that my mother did teach me. I just didn't know at the time if it was because we were Southern or like because of the influence of the church in our lives or other reasons. But so I'm really, really proud of that. And I feel like early on being aware of the identity and how special it was, and really clinging to that, even though it wasn't something that was encouraged, and really pulling back the curtain and going all the way in was something that probably was a protective factor for me as a young person. Was something that was, always had a assured sense of who I was in a way, I think at an early age. So it means everything to me.
Oftentimes, I experienced this in college, as a lot of us did, where I grew up in my Native American community. It was a checkerboarded reservation. So I went to a public school, but my family and everyone was on the res. But in school, you didn't hear a whole lot about the Native American experience taught in school, right? And it wasn't until I went to college and joined up with the Native American organization at my university where I really began to get a sense of what that experience was, or at least I started to connect those dots. I'm just curious if maybe that was an experience that you had as well that sort of pushed you to enroll into your tribe, or was there someone that had influenced those conversations and that experience for you?
Yeah, I think it was both. I think when I got to college, I wanted to be in the club. I wanted to be, accepted by my Native peers, and I wanted to be able to pull the card out and say, no, I know my last name is different, but I am Lumbee. There were also, I was fortunate at UNC Chapel Hill to have there was a student advisor who was a Native American man who all of us had access to. He was there to support us. And so I remember early on sort of meeting mentors and then beginning to even meet some of my extended family who were leaders in our tribal community that I didn't even know.
Mm.
My mom was, my mother's family was so poor. And they actually she grew up in South Carolina, which is just below the border. Robinson County is North Carolina, and then there's the border. And she grew up down there, which is not very far away. But when you're very poor and you don't have transportation, it was another world away. So she didn't really even know her first cousins that were in the Lumbee community. And when I got to college and I started reaching out to meet some of our extended family, I knew all my first cousins, but my mom's cousins, I was like, I learned that we had, she had first cousins who were professors in universities and now are, deans of schools. And I didn't even know we had educated people in my family. Mm-hmm. And so I really also, just from a point of view of wanting to do well in school and become a different person than what I saw around me, I began kind of clinging to those family members and wanting to have their support and be in community with them. So it was both for these older people that I saw leading in our community. We've had folks who have, my mom's first cousins who ran our community development association at the tribe. And so I felt a sense of pride about that. And I think the other part was just as a student and beginning to connect the dots and realizing, getting politicized in college, right? Like, wow, we weren't taught these things in school about our communities. Anything we taught about natives seemed to like sort of end when the Mayflower arrived or whatever, or a couple of the wars. You hear a little bit about natives, but there was a deep hunger inside of me to really know our history, to understand, how did this tribe come to be in North Carolina and is still here in spite of, Trail of Tears and all the different things that happen. I'm like, well, I'm a part of like a badass group of people, so all of those things really had me on that course to discover and understand. And it's been the most beautiful experience of my life. I talk about it a lot because in the work that I do, a lot of it is about self-discovery and understanding who we are and what our original instructions are. Even for people who aren't Native, white people that I'll talk to, I'm like, you could do this too with your family and your ancestors. You have them. I think it's by looking back and understanding where we came from, it just really is so empowering in terms of how we chart our course and future.
Hmm. Well, your book, Decolonizing Wealth, has touched so many. What was the moment or the pain that sparked your need to write that book?
Yeah, I think the earliest moments where I had gotten into my first job in philanthropy in North Carolina. I worked at the largest health funder in the state, and this the mission of this organization was to support the health of the poorest people in North Carolina. And when I started working there, I saw two things. One, we had zero grantee partners. We were moving zero money to support Native communities in North Carolina. And we have a good sizable population in North Carolina. That just kind of, I was like, wow, like we are literally the poorest community, and the mission says to support the poorest communities, and we're not being supported. So I wondered what that was about. So that was really sort of like one angle. I think the second angle was for me being Indigenous in this, all of a sudden, this really privileged space. where I'm around the table. I'm a part of an organization that's moving tens of millions of dollars every year. I all of a sudden had this power and influence. I would be in the grocery store. People would want to come and talk to me because they thought maybe I could help them get money for their organization or whatever. And that was a very weird situation for someone who comes from quite the opposite type of community where I felt like I had no power. We had no resources. And in those situations, I was like, okay, I have to do what I can to advocate and bring visibility to Native people. We should be funding these communities. But what I found in beginning to talk to these educated folks across foundations of philanthropy about Native communities is that they were so ignorant about our communities. The things that were said to me just blew my mind. People believed we didn't pay taxes. People thought we didn't need money because we had casinos and all these. And I'm like, have you been to a Native community? And so I was like really frustrated often that I was in this situation where it was so hard to get money for Native groups. I'm like, why is this even, why am I having to like make the case over and over? And what I begin to understand within that system of philanthropy is that you have rich people, rich corporations who give this money to start a foundation, right? They get major tax breaks. And so it helps them become richer. And then often the money that is in that foundation is just going to other rich people. It's going to their friends and network. And those of us who are outside of those systems who don't have wealth in the first place, we're not benefiting from the wealth of others that should have been taxed and put into the public systems, to support our public schools or whatever. And they were not even getting any of the grants from the philanthropy that's connected to it. It's just like, an injustice there. And so I became just increasingly agitated. And then I also just felt just racism towards me in a way, in my identity, because, when I began to ask questions, I was, kind of told like, yeah, you need to just kind of put your head down and do your job. You're so lucky to work here, those kinds of things. And so advocacy wasn't welcome. And I realized I was hired as a token. I was hired because they could check a box. I had gone to graduate school. I, knew the content. I could speak the language. I could do the job well enough. But actually who I was as a person, where I came from and all that I had to bring because I was Native, that was something they weren't really interested in. And I remember one day in particular where it was a pain so deep in my heart that I think it really kind of opened the door for me to go down in terms of really interrogating a lot of this. I was in a board meeting and I was really fighting for this one particular organization to get funding. I knew they were doing incredible work. It aligned with everything the foundation said it was about, what it wanted to do. And I could not get a yes. They were saying, well, we don't know that group. Let's wait a while and see. Or, they need to, they don't have a track record. Just all this like coded racist language for not giving money to this organization. And I'm sitting around the table with mostly, wealthy white people who have this power. And at a certain point, I think I just kept pushing a little bit harder because I knew this community was relying on this funding and what could happen if they got it. And my president spoke up and shut me down and embarrassed me in front of the entire room. And she said, Edgar, you're getting too big for your britches. And if you're from the South, that means that you're really kind of behaving outside of your pay grade. It's a very demeaning kind of thing to say to a person. Like, you need to know your place, put your head down and shut up. And I think I had this moment where I was like, I'm in this world that is performing and says these things and is supposed to be about this kind of change in the world, but in reality it's not. And sort of like my eyes were open to this reality, and I felt really frustrated about it and wanted to do something to disrupt that.
Yeah, because we often hear the word, and you've demonstrated this, where the philanthropy is people think of it as institutions and power. And you invite us to see it as a form of healing. Can money truly be medicine?
Yeah, I believe so. And, for me, it has been, and I've seen many people sort of receive healing through distributing resources in a different way. Mm-hmm. That came to me through a really powerful moment. I had left philanthropy for a while because I started feeling just really disillusioned about it. I was like, this is a fraud. This is not what it's supposed to be. And I felt kind of icky about working with money. I was like, surely there's something else I can do with to make a difference in the world. Maybe this is not the space. And I had I was in Robinson County where my people are, and I was spending time with some elders there. And one elder in particular, we had breakfast, and I was just pouring my heart out. Like, I feel a little lost right now. I thought I could do some good in this kind of work, but it's not serving me. And throughout the course of that conversation, this elder actually said to me, Edgar, the medicine that has chosen you is money. And that one sentence changed my life. I'd never even thought of money as something that could be sacred, because, when we say something sacred as Indigenous people, it's really sacred. And I've this connotation around money of being this thing that's harmful and dirty and, greed and all the things. And I was like, how can this be sacred? And that really led me on a deep path of thinking about that and unpacking that. She told me also that, the medicine doesn't choose you, or the medicine chooses you. You don't choose the medicine. And so I kind of felt like, wow, like I have been actually called to do this work. And how can I, how do I reconcile that? And in a way where I indigenize this. And so that led me to, the book that I wrote, where I'm sharing my personal experience of that healing journey of really reimagining what wealth is, and then understanding the power and the spirit and energy behind money and all the harm it has done, but also how that can be sort of flipped on a paradigm to facilitate healing in the world. And then also the worldview that we as Indigenous people have about resources and money. The way that we are have a mindset of abundance, the way that the potluck ceremonies that used to happen. I'm like, wow, we actually have a beautiful worldview around how economy should be, how we take care of each other, what philanthropy, we were the original philanthropists. Mm. And so that really kind of lit a fire in me. And I'm like, well, there's a reason that I found myself in this industry, which is a rare place for a Native to kind of find themselves. And so, and writing that book was really coming from that conviction that money can be medicine, both for the communities that have been harmed throughout history and marginalized, but also for the people who have money and give that money and receive healing and sort of liberation from all the things that they might be struggling with as people who are born into those families that have been hoarding wealth and harming people.
Yeah. You've said that wealth is trauma when hoarded and healing when shared. What does liberated capital look like in practice?
Yeah, so Liberated Capital is a community of currently 700 people that I started in 2019. And it really came to be in an organic way. The book had come out the year before. I was around speaking a lot about these ideas, and people were really coming to me saying that they believed in this. They wanted to give money in a different way. They wanted to practice this. People were sending money to me saying, we trust you, you should give it to whoever. It was all these things happening. And so I thought, why don't we create this community that actually does embody the beliefs and values around reciprocity and all the things that we believe. We'll create these funds, we'll turn the money over to community leaders to deploy. And in this community, we'll just, practice like a new way of thinking of ourselves as donors. Because typically donors, if you're a donor, that means you have power, you have money, you decide things. And I'm like, we're all donors. We all give every day. We're all philanthropists. So what does it mean to show up into this community with a different identity where you're not, there to decide or control, but you're there to give the resources. And when you liberate yourself from the need to control, like what can you open yourself up to in terms of healing? And so that is what our community is. It's a place where we have pooled resources across race, class, wealth, all the things. Some people give $5 a month, others give a lot more. We've taken those resources and leveraged those across philanthropy with foundations to increase the money. And so far we've given out through that community $23 million since 2019. Half of that has been to Indigenous communities, tribes, and organizations across the U.S. And so it's really, to me, it's the message of like us coming together, doing what we can, even if it's a little bit. It's powerful when it comes together and it's done in the right way. And it has demonstrated that money can be healing, where we bring these folks together, some who have money, into the community we're all in the circle together, right? It's so Indigenous. It's so easy for Native relatives to understand what we're talking about. But for a lot of folks, this is really new to be like in a different circle with folks, seeing like all my relations, we're all here and we want the same things. And also the idea of healing that some people have is very internal, and which is true, but it's also healing begins to happen sometimes through our actions, right? By initiating a conversation that you need to have, by going to a place. And money is this representation often of our energy or our passions or whatever. And so if you have hoarded wealth in your family because you have taken land, you have enslaved people historically, you've done harmful things through business, having that wealth now, you're holding that negative energy, and by giving it back, there is some liberation that comes into the lives of folks, and repair and reconciliation that has happened. So yeah, it's an amazing community. Everybody's invited to check it out. We do have an Indigenous giving circle as well as a part of that community.
I imagine walking into a room full of corporate executives can be intimidating. Are there echoes of that young boy from North Carolina within you when you walk into those rooms, or have you become someone else to survive?
Yeah. I still struggle sometimes. I learned to, code switch with the best of them, back in the day. And when I got into the field of philanthropy, which over 20 years ago, there were like spoken and unspoken rules about how you had to dress and show up and all of that. So it was a very corporate kind of environment. So I learned the game of code switching and navigating and managing up and kind of speaking to the brand, all the things you got to do. And I will say that, I often still feel out of place. I think, sometimes to be Native is almost like having a bit of an identity crisis, because we're not often taught. I love places where we are teaching our children at a young age and they have that. But for a lot of folks in our community, older, especially because of boarding schools and otherwise, we've had to reclaim that. And so, yeah, I've gotten to a place, at the ripe old age that I am now, where I've really learned that exactly who I am is the biggest asset, and that I have. And people often say to me like, "Oh my God, you're so authentic." And I'm like, authentic is like the easiest way to be. Like, it's just really being yourself. Like, but to have to try to be authentic, or to be, the world is just so full of fake stuff, I guess, or fake people, that when you're just really yourself, people really enjoy that. Yeah. When I first moved to New York City, 10 years ago, I went to, speech lessons, trying to, my Southern accent. I felt ashamed and I wouldn't receive respect. And even with my book, I did not do the audio recording. I'm like, no one wants to listen to my voice. Like I can't say a lot of words right. I got this accent. And I learned even through that experience, when the book came out, there were people who were really upset with me because they wanted to hear me tell the story. And so I've even learned to embrace some of those parts of myself that I just really haven't loved, with, having my accent and the way that I talk. That, just because it is actually the combination of all those things that make me who I am, that people just actually want. And when you can be authentic and tell your story and share your creation with others, it's just really refreshing. So I'm good now. I've walked out on stages and talked to 10,000 people. I don't shake in my shoes. I do feel the weight of how important something is. And, I want to do a good job. I know that it's not fair, but in some places I'm like representing our entire community. People have never met a native before. And so I do feel that weight that I have the privilege and honor of going to a lot of places, to talk about our communities. And we're not a monolith as a people, but I want to do the best job I can to represent us. And, so that part is a little, I get a little anxious about.
You've answered most of this question, but I still wanted to pose this. Let's talk about identity, right? You're Indigenous, gay man in spaces that historically weren't made for you. How have those intersections helped you carve your own path?
Yeah, I always think about when we're not included in mainstream spaces, we've always kind of created our own, and I love that about people, marginalized folks from all types of backgrounds. So in some ways, I feel that that's what I've been able to do at DWP, because I love philanthropy. I love this sector, and I did my best to fit in, and I made it a long time. I moved up in the world in that space, but there's a part of me that's like, that space will never be the kind of space that it needs to be for me and for a lot of folks. And so to be able to carve that out and indigenize philanthropy and create ways to move money that is right for me and what I believe in, has been a beautiful thing to witness. Yeah, I mean, I've done all the pretending and, and the code switching that we talked about, hiding, not sharing myself. Partly, especially, not only am I Native, but I come from a part of the country that's super conservative. My family's pretty conservative. I grew up in a right-wing evangelical church. And so I had a lot of decolonizing to do. I had a lot of unlearning to do about all of these things. And then I happen to be who I am in that space. And as parts of my identity have come more forward, there is not welcome in those spaces. And so I've had to learn a lot of self-love. I think earlier in my life, I was a people pleaser. I still am a little bit. It's hard to shed that completely, but I've also just learned to love myself more and to not care as much about what people think. The gifts that come with older age, I'm a young elder over here. So you're like, I don't give a rat's A about that anymore, And also I think I stand really proud in my shoes because I know that I've done a lot to serve my community. I feel really proud about that. And I'm like, regardless of who anybody is or where they come from that wants to like hate on me, they can't hate on, what I've done to try to give back and do things for my community. So I feel so proud of that. And I also love that because I feel like in my particular community, in the Lumbee community, which can be pretty conservative, we have historically been pretty democratic, are always democratic until quite recently. There's been, a turn in that. And but it's interesting even in that community where politically some folks are more conservative, there's still sort of this like acceptance of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There's still that Native thing of like, we're all family and no matter, even if you don't go to church, people still love you and look out for you. And, and then I've been in the position to do a lot of things to give back. And so people know, maybe they don't agree with my lifestyle or whatever. People know that I love my community and that I love them and I'm doing everything I can up in New York City to help. And so there's a respect and acknowledgement of that. And so I hope that I'm making it a little easier for the next generation. but yeah, and I also, it's been interesting to me because I can still see again where, the colonization has impacted thinking and worldview in some ways. I still see the indigeneity in that, and how people are like, well, the church tells me this, but you're my people, so I still love you and you're accepted here. So
Mhm.
it's interesting. So yeah, I think I'm embracing. It's taken me a long time, but I am embracing. The native part of me has always been my primary identity. Other parts of me, in terms of being, a gay man, have taken me longer to kind of accept. And I haven't even sort of publicly talked about it until the last sort of year or two.
Hmm.
I think I still had some internalized stuff, or some fear of not being accepted, or, I don't want to disappoint anybody, and so that's, I'm still on that journey of really understanding, like, it's actually a gift to be different. And being Indigenous has helped me understand the other part of me, like the both and sort of historically, in a lot of our communities, how they view Two-Spirit people as being so gifted and healers in our community. So I'm like, it makes sense that I am who I am. I mean,
I hope that question was okay, appropriate.
oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're not just I can't, you're not just decolonizing wealth, right? You're decolonizing language, narrative, and space. What would you say to young Indigenous creatives who feel unseen?
Yeah, one is, I would say that we are more seen than we know.
Hmm.
And especially right now, I do some work in the fashion industry, doing more work around artistic spaces. I see Indigenous leaders everywhere, and folks love our art. They love all the things that we contribute. We're having a moment right now. This year at New York Fashion Week will be a fifth year of a party that we hold for Indigenous designers and creative. And 5 years ago, it was like 15 of us, and now we're renting out an entire rooftop with, I
Hmm.
forget how many, like 150 people. And so we're no longer in the shadows, in this artistic arena. We are really, taking center stage, and from designers to models to artists to, all the folks who are getting deals with huge brands and all that. So it's a good time to be an Indigenous creative, because there are a lot of folks who are breaking down these barriers and pushing through. And so I think it's all the things we've been talking about, Joe. I think it's like really just having that confidence in who we are and what we do. And everything that we touch is like kind of, I feel like, becomes kind of sacred. It's like, we don't just make things. Like, everything has like this spiritual connotation, and it just feels, I want to say that we're like magical, but I feel like that's feeding into the stereotype sometimes. But I do believe there's just a way that we move through the world, and how our worldview, and it comes out in the things that we create. And so it's hard to, we're really special, and what we create is really special. So just understanding that as young as possible, and clinging to that, and you don't want to be like other people. They want to be like us.
Hmm.
They always have, and that's partly why they're mad. it's, that's what I would offer.
Haters are gonna hate, right?
Right.
So many people in activism experience burnout. How do you protect your own spirit in doing such emotionally demanding work?
Yeah, great question. I am so involved in a lot of healing practice. Um, One, at the simplest level, is like making sure I get back home, that I spend time in community, that I see my people, my family. I think especially living away from home in New York City, we've created community there. There's lots of great Indigenous things happening, and spaces and organizations now. But I try to just get back to the roots and to the foundation of it all for me in North Carolina when I can. The other part of that is I talk about healing, and I practice healing in my work. my organization, we do ceremony together. We, even at our monthly staff meeting, at the top of that meeting, we are doing some type of reflection, meditation, body movement, something to really put healing at the center of what we do. Our work is very spiritual, and the work that we do to train philanthropists and corporations, they don't know that they're kind of in ceremony, but I'm bringing elements of ceremony into those spaces. And then I get away myself. I go off. I'm trying to make this an annual practice to go off the grid for a week and just be in ceremony. So we know how to sustain ourselves. We know how to be resilient. We know a lot about healing in our communities. And so it's just making sure we are practicing those things, that we're spending time with our elders, with young people, and being connected to each other and to our art and creation, and whatever types of cultural practices we might have to kind of feel grounded. And I'm a city boy, grew up in the city, and then live in New York now. But I love to get out in nature when I can. I complained about it a little bit at first because I've gotten like out here in the woods, but I have learned to really appreciate being the land, and we're doing a lot of work around land right now in my organization. So actually getting out, feet on the ground, and just receiving that healing that comes from the land is really important for me as well. So those are a couple of things that I offer.
Yeah. In all the spaces that you've navigated, where do you feel the most like yourself?
Outside of home, because it's always going to be home for me, probably in North Carolina. A place that really speaks to me is Mexico City. And I'll tell you why. I love a beautiful city that has all the things that good cities offer, from museums to parks to food and restaurants. When I first went to Mexico City about 4 years ago, I was like, wow, this is an indigenous city. This is most of the places we go in the States, we're, small numbers, we're not, maybe there's, definitely my brother lives in Albuquerque. You go down in the Southwest, you can see a lot of brown people, indigenous folk. But something about Mexico City for me was like, wow, this is an indigenous city that is I would put Mexico City against any major European city or American city as just a beautiful place that has all the things you would want. But I also, when I'm in Mexico City, can feel like sort of the vibe of like the culture that is so familiar and accepted, and it's like pervasive, right? It's like everybody is brown, everybody's indigenous. If you are white here, you're in the minority. And so I spent a lot of time in Mexico City because it feels like a place that's so different from where I grew up, where I feel like Native folks were relegated to a rural county, a reservation, to break out of that, and become like successful, however, society may want to define that, you're kind of like an outlier. And there's just places like Mexico City where I'm like, wow, there are just indigenous people thriving all around and running this and building this. And like, it's kind of like the Wakanda for indigenous people in my mind, So I would just say I do feel myself here, and I feel inspired and just more connected spiritually when I'm in Mexico City, because it's still the big city that I want and need. And then it speaks to my soul in a way that is amazing. But yeah, it's hard. That's a hard question. Because that's sort of a recent love. But my brother living in New Mexico, there's just something about that land too, that it is enchanted, as they say. It's really spiritual. So I love visiting relatives in that part of the country as well.
I was there about 25 years ago. It's a beautiful city. Yeah. You started the Decolonizing Wealth Project in 2018. What has surprised you the most in the years since?
I would say um, I'm really surprised at the impact that we've been able to have, the way that the ideas in the book were embraced. So in 2018 is when I put the book out. I didn't really plan to start an organization in the way that we have now. It was really kind of starting an organization to support the activities around the book. And when I put the book out, I was terrified. I thought, this is the end for me. I will never work in this industry again. It was, um, a lot of people will say to me, "Oh, you were so brave." I didn't feel brave. I mean, I got a lawyer. I was ready. I was like, they're going to come for me. I
Mm.
need to make sure I'm not going to get sued. So, that was sort of the origin of this, and putting the book out. I was so surprised that people actually embraced the book. I wasn't blacklisted. I was celebrated. And it hit at a time that the message was just being really received. People were just have been frustrated with this sector of philanthropy, with how, the frustration we have with the wealth gap in this country. We have, and so, yeah, I was really sort of surprised that, I had planned like 4 or 5 events. When you put a book out, you do a couple bookstores and sign books, and you hope that someone other than your mother buys the book, kind of thing. And in to late 2018, I had the launch party in New York City. The launch party grew from like a group of friends, doing a small thing, to a huge event in New York with 300 people that had, sort of, I felt like the who's who of whatever. It was like a mind blowing launch party. And I knew even at that moment, something felt different. We indigenized that space. We had some entertainers from like Broadway, but then I had elders there singing and drumming and hoop dancing, native art all around. We did, I brought some artists to New York City who had never been to New York and never shown their art there. And so we had a lot of influential folks in that place who said they had never felt what they felt in that room that night, which is what the experience I've tried to create every time, everywhere I go. But I've been really, really surprised. I had no plan, no blueprint. We literally have been following spirit in this work. 5 years later, we did a big evaluation, because all these things were happening, where I'm like, I need to like actually be able to tell the story of what has happened. And so when you look at the influence of our work, which has been out speaking, training, holding space with wealthy folks, working inside corporations, all of this to make these shifts to unlock money for our communities, it's just been mind blowing that the impact of a story, one person, little Lumbee me, telling my story, and the way that it resonated with all kinds of people from all around the world, and like created sort of this movement. And, fast forward, when we did that 5 year kind of look back, we had influence in like nearly $1 billion of money going toward racial and economic justice. People would, people would make decisions like, we're going to spend down our foundation and hand the money over to community. The Bush Foundation in St. Paul, Minnesota, created a $100 million trust fund. They were influenced by the work for Native and Black communities. Foundations, a foundation was an Indigenous foundation was created in Australia, modeled after all the things in the book and our work. So there's people I haven't even met yet that we've impacted. So that worldwide impact is really mind blowing and humbling for me. I would have never imagined. If I knew what I knew now, I would have found the money to have a documentary crew follow me around in 2019. I did 180, I believe, keynotes in 2019. Like, what went from 4 events became like, it was like many, 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 many things. And I saw the shifts happening under my feet in terms of a lot of the things we have been hoping for in this industry to change, things begin to change. Now, of course, we're facing the backlash right now and a lot of things, but it did really push us forward in some really real ways. And so that's been a big surprise. And I think another surprise for me is that people still want more. It's been 7 years since the book came out, And I am working on a new project, but I'm really amazed that people still want to talk about decolonizing wealth. And I'm still, every week I'm in places where people are telling me that it's impacting their work. So that is, I'm so surprised by that, and so deeply, deeply honored that it's had that type of impact.
With all of this, everything that you're sharing, you feel you feel very grounded. Who helps you stay grounded? Who's the person that's influencing you there?
I would say my mom and just some friends. I come. My family is still living in poverty, is still experiencing. I'm doing all right for myself, and but I'm not too far away from pain and things happening. I've my family, several family members are incarcerated or in and out of jail or struggling with substance abuse, and I get weekly text messages asking for money and help from my family, and I do what I can to help people. So they, I don't know that my mom could even tell anybody what I do for a living, So they're not impressed with me. I mean, they're very proud of me and they love me, but they're not, when I get home sometimes, or if my mom has seen me, like overheard me on a work call, she'll kind of make fun of me. Like, why are you talking like that? Why are you talking like you're rich? Who do you think you are? So, I appreciate that. And I think, I have also just, have really amazing friends and community that I've built around me who protect me, who have called me out. I remember one friend calling me saying that I had posted something on social media that just felt like really like, didn't seem like something I would post. It just felt like it was like, I don't know, like my ego was getting out there or something. He's like, so I was like, well, hey, I appreciate that. Maybe I was starting to feel myself a little bit too much there. So I think, so it's good to have accountability and stay connected to where you came from. And, and just also just, I know that anything I've been able to do that I've been a part of, I didn't do it by myself. I didn't get here by myself. I stand on a lot of shoulders. It is the creator, it is community. I, in some ways got lucky, or I was called, or however you want to think about it, to do this particular work. But, I know that as fast as I got here, it could all be taken away. And, I'm so rooted and grounded in where do we go next and what should I be doing next? Cause it's to stay in my calling. That I, will pat myself on the back and my team will all celebrate, but we are kind of, on to the next thing, and not getting too caught up in ourselves.
No, it's good to have the right people around you, right? Not to get lost and caught up in everything. Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to get to a couple questions before we go. If you could whisper a truth into the ear of every foundation president and CEO in the country, what would you say?
Wow, that's a great question, because I feel like I've been screaming it in their ears for a while. Yeah, what would I say? I think I would say something along the lines of, it's not your money. It's not your money. I think one of my biggest pet peeves are folks who work in philanthropic institutions it's not their money. They work there. They're stewards of the resources, and they treat the money as if it's their own money. And they get, the egos and all the things that come with that. Because it is a powerful position, and community and folks will put you on a pedestal and treat you that way, because that's how we're accustomed to getting money. But, I think my favorite people are the ones who realize that they are, in a position to organize and to be a catalyst and to facilitate these resources getting out, but it's not their money. There are folks who are protective of that wealth and that power because it's self-serving, and I just really detest that.
Mm-hmm. Do you still have a dream that scares you?
That is a good question. I think so. I think, you know, I think where my work is evolving right now makes me a little nervous. I I don't know what the specific dream is, but I want to, as much impact as we've had. I want to think. I'm thinking through ways to really be a part of just expanding healing and spirituality in a massive way in our communities and beyond. And the thread of healing that is so present in our work is my favorite part of the work. Like moving the money and all that is really awesome, but it's like the lives that are changed as a result of the money moving right is what I'm obsessed with. And I know, I feel a little bit nervous about, I've come out of this Christian evangelical movement, which I have been writing and condemning, not the authentic sort of Christian church, but the way that it's been hijacked and become this political party and a part of this MAGA thing, which I don't even recognize. Speaking out against that more and more. I actually went to seminary back in the day. I was in it. And so I feel that I have some credibility to kind of speak towards the harmful, terrible stuff I see happening in the name of Christianity today. That is hard because there are people in that movement that I love and care about, and I also can't sit back and not say anything. And then I think the calling that I'm feeling to be more of a healer and to support folks into finding their own spirituality is work that it doesn't make me nervous because in a sense, because I have been sort of trained for ministry and helping people, and I've been doing that my whole life. But I think doing that in this new way that is really outside the bounds of a religion or whatever is something that makes me kind of nervous because I think it's just so important that we all are tapped into some type of spiritual practice and in our lives, and that we're not. I feel like we're incomplete without it. And also modeling that and telling people to do that is kind of an interesting place to be. I want to really walk the walk and talk the talk in that work. So yeah, I'm excited. So my nervousness or anxiety is coming from a place of excitement. I think about that, but yeah, it's new territory for me.
Okay. Well, we're pretty much out of time, but I wanted to give you the last word. What can you share with our listeners? Is what's on the horizon with you, and how can we connect with you and your organization?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Our website is decolonizingwealth.com. There's lots of ways to connect, of course, just from socials and following along. Invite folks to join our Liberty Capital community if you want to give some money and be a part of that, turn it into really big things. If you're a native and want to be a part of our native giving circle, reach out because that's probably not on our website. We've got a new website that we're still kind of updating. But we do have a cohort of really cool native folks where we're pulling our money together and giving money. And we just like meet and have fun and support each other. So that's another offering. Next, where we're going is that we just really want to go big with all of this. So we have a new moonshot, we call it, which is our 10-year strategy. That strategy is laser focused on unlocking $1 trillion in funding towards repair. And so I mentioned earlier, we had already unlocked $1 billion. So I feel like we can get there. $1 trillion sounds like monopoly money. Is like not even real. It's such a large number. But we are really going to push and from our platform on Philanthropy, which currently has over $1 trillion just locked up in their endowments, and also wealthy folks who should be giving and could be giving more, and all the other ways that government should be taking over our community to unlock those resources. We are really big believers in truth and reconciliation. We've been very involved in supporting California natives in that work. I hope to see more truth and reconciliation processes happen across our country and, of course, nationally. I think they're important both from a spiritual point of view, but also naming and documenting history that has happened, and the opportunity for our Native peoples to weigh in on what we want and demand for healing and reconciliation. And so that's work that we're continuing to kind of push and learning from what happens in California. We're thinking about how we can really help to support that work in other communities. And I think the last thing that I'll mention is this work around just being connected spiritually and what that means for us as individuals, as relatives, as leaders in community. How do we begin that process if you weren't born into that and taught that? How do you get on a path to awaken that within yourself and to learn to listen and be guided by that? I've learned the hard way, and also through some good teaching, how to kind of tune in. And we are creating in our work just more opportunities to support people through healing. It's that work that's important that actually leads to the giving of money. So we have some programs where we actually bring wealthy folks into a healing experience, and that's really focused on their personal transformation. And then, of course, their money just goes after that, because it's connected to their intentions. So we want to kind of scale that money, yes, but those programs even more. So that's kind of where we're going. We are going to be just lifting up and supporting Native folks and Indigenous folks and what they want and need. We have some really amazing work happening also in California, supporting about 20 plus tribes to rematriate land. We are providing technical assistance and legal supports and giving them block funding. And we just had our first partner just 2 weeks ago get 300 acres of land. And so I'm thinking more and more about our role as we're thinking about money. Land is also a resource that is important to our communities. How can we facilitate more land return to our people? So those are some of the major threads we're thinking about and we'll be expanding on.
Incredible. Well, that's all the time we have. Please come back to this program. I have more questions I want to ask you and keep this conversation going. But Edgar, thank you so much for joining us. This is really wonderful.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me. Look forward to our next time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, be well.
Thank you.
Edgar reminds us that systems can be transformed when we lead with intention and truth. Through his vision of money as medicine, he offers a path forward, one rooted in equity, accountability, and collective healing. This is Beyond the Art.